The following program contains adult themes. Some scenes may be too intense for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Why would a father sexually abuse his own daughter? Can a mother live in the same house and not know? And can those unspeakable acts lead to something far worse?
He's cold-blooded, he's heartless. John shows no remorse and probably never will.
I just didn't want to believe that someone I married could do something like that.
I wanted to satisfy my own sexual desires, and I didn't care who it hurt, even though it was my own daughter.
How can a father commit incest with his own child merely to fulfill his sexual needs? How can he betray the love and trust of his own daughter in such a callous and selfish way? I'm Teresa Saldana, and this is Confessions of Crime. Tonight, we'll explore the mind of John Reardon using a startling videotaped confession recorded at the time of his arrest. And we'll also have a unique interview with Reardon, who talks candidly about his abuse and why he couldn't stop. A rare glimpse inside the mind of an actual abuser. Incest is a secretive and terrifying crime that strikes hundreds of thousands of families in America each year. Hidden away in outwardly normal homes, it damages children's lives forever. But John Reardon, a seemingly normal truck mechanic who lived on a farm outside the small town of Underwood, Minnesota, was not thinking of his daughter's welfare. He had married for a second time and had a large family of 11 children. But his eye was on his first daughter, Sarah. Sarah was only 8 years old when she first became the target of Reardon's sexual appetite. And for 5 long years, Reardon continually abused his daughter. Now, an exclusive encounter with John Reardon.
At first, it was like once every 3 or 4 months. It was like not a real common thing. But then, as she got older and as my perversions kept getting worse, it would become like a once-a-month occurrence or twice a month. And it just was unsatisfiable.
I don't know. I don't think she told anyone this was going on. She wanted to portray that her family was normal, and especially her dad. My daddy loves me. My daddy loves me.
Sometimes love is unexplainable. It was a perverted love, and yet I still had the natural affection for her. And it was all mixed up.
The reason that I always thought that John had turned to Sarah to meet his sexual needs was that the family environment he was living in was so dysfunctional. His relationship with Marilyn was just, terrible.
In terms of family sexual abuse, I see that issue more of a need for emotional intimacy that the perpetrator cannot achieve with an adult and only with the child. And this is part of their emotional shortcomings.
I think he turned to her for the nurturing that he wasn't getting anywhere else in the family. And he exploited, what should have been a normal parental love into something that was really aberrant and terrible.
Perpetrator will resort to any mode of behavior, from blackmailing the victim with a threat of divorce, that it will be her fault, or to victimizing the younger sibling if she stopped in cooperating with the sexual abuse, to blackmailing or bribery.
Did you pay her for those sexual favors?
In the beginning I did. Towards the last, she made her own money, babysit. She didn't want money.
John Reardon knew what he was doing was wrong, but he didn't seem to care, and he couldn't stop. He was obsessed with sex. he went to great lengths to hide his dark secret.
What I would do is I'd try to pick times when the other children were involved in activities either at school or their mother was taking them someplace. So I'd try to wait till the times when there was the fewest number of people there. And either that or it would be late at night when everybody was sleeping. And it would happen like in the bathroom area or some place like that where I could close the door and people couldn't actually walk in and catch me in the act. And that's one reason why I was never really discovered, because I would make sure that it was in an area where I could hear other people.
How was it possible for John Reardon's wife, Marilyn, to be unaware of what was going on month after month under her own roof? Were there no telltale signs?
Sexual abuse isn't something that people do and let people know about it. They're not gonna, they don't want it known. They want it kept a secret. And I know that people are going to condemn me and say, you can't live in a house and not know. But I lived in that house and I did not know.
We as investigators felt that it had to be known by other members of the family. Later, it did come out that possibly the mother had been told by a daughter.
One bizarre aspect of John Reardon's incest with his daughter is that many people now believe he was attracted to Sarah because she looked like her mother, Reardon's first wife. Was he reliving some warped sexual fantasy for a love gone wrong?
Sarah he found as the apple of his eye, that he viewed as being very attractive and reminded him immensely of his first wife, that he still considered himself in love with his first wife, and that Sarah seemed to trigger this, and that the intensity seemed to increase as she reached the age of pubescence.
The more I got involved with this incest relationship, the more hardened my heart became towards it. I didn't really feel any shame or guilt after a period of several years. That didn't really bother me that much.
I believe John feels that that it was okay for him to have sex with his daughter. It was his daughter, and he could do anything that he wanted to do.
I think Sarah always believed that someday her dad would change for the better. She always had that hope. And I don't believe that Sarah was afraid of me physically. She wanted to end the relationship, sexual relationship, and she was afraid of that as to where it was leading. But I don't think she was afraid of me personally. She knew that I wouldn't harm her physically.
John must have threatened her, got her so scared that she wouldn't tell. And she'd seen his temper many times, so she probably was scared of him.
As Sarah approached the age of 13, she was growing up, and she wanted to be free of her father's sexual impulses. John Reardon was now confronted with his daughter's constant complaints. Repeatedly, they bickered and argued. But still, he fought to keep her from escaping his sexual tyranny. In a moment, we'll see what happened when Sarah finally said no, and John Reardon was about to lose everything. Stay with us. John Reardon would not stop his terrible behavior, would not stop his sexual abuse of his daughter. He used every trick to keep Sarah in his power. But eventually, he failed.
Sarah had a lot of gumption, I guess you could call it, and confronted me with the fact that I was ruining her future. She did confront me with that.
She said she wanted to grow up to be a normal little girl, and she didn't want to do those things anymore.
What was your response to that, Sean?
I agreed with her.
You knew it was wrong?
Yes.
When they reach the age of pre-adolescent, 12, 13, typically this is the age that we refer to as the age of establishing autonomy and independence. This is the time they begin to rebel. This is the time they begin to assert their sense of individuality. And because of that, they will be a form of trying to escape their own dilemma.
I told her she was right. I said, Sarah, you're right. I said, we gotta, and I always tried to make it seem like she was guilty. I'd say, we have to continue this, even though I knew she wasn't guilty in any respect. It was all on my part. I bear the guilt for whatever happened to her.
John Reardon controlled Sarah's life, and she couldn't see a way out. Then, on May 20th, 1985, Sarah disappeared on her way home from school. She set off to walk the 3.5 miles home, but she never arrived. Had Sarah run away, or had she met with a killer?
I remember the night of May 20th when she disappeared. It was about 10:30 at night, and I got a call from Marilyn, and she said, is Sarah there? And I said, no. She said, oh, I thought probably she was there because she's not home yet.
John wasn't very worried. That's what it seemed to me. He just said, well, maybe she's with a friend or went home with another classmate or something. It was very frustrating because I didn't know where to look. I didn't know what to do. And you go about your normal life, but it's always there in the back of your mind as to what happened to her and where she was and if she was alive. It's very hard to go through something like that.
Over the next 5 weeks, an exhaustive search was launched for the missing girl. The entire town joined in and searched the surrounding area, day after day, night after night. Flyers with pictures of Sarah were circulated all over the country. John Reardon, a man who had secretly spent 5 years sexually abusing Sarah, was a very visible leader of the search. He talked tirelessly to local TV and radio news crews. He implored Sarah to come home. He pleaded with the public to phone in tips and leads, the perfect picture of a loving father. Yet after more than a month of searching, not one clue was uncovered.
Law enforcement usually searches just the immediate area, like 3-4 miles or surrounding where they think the person disappeared. What we would like to do is search at least a 25 to a 50-mile radius.
John made himself look very good to people, and he did a very good job at it. He had the news people believing that he was a very loving and caring father. He manipulated a lot of people in this community and the news media and the reporters.
6.5 weeks after Sarah disappeared, July 6th, her body was discovered by a farmer. She had been brutally murdered and dumped in a drainage ditch 25 miles outside of town.
I'll never forget the day of July 6th. We were staying at the cabin, and my mom and dad came in, and they said, they found Sarah. And she's dead. They couldn't believe it.
All of us officers, and there was 4 of us that worked on the case primarily, shared the same thoughts. First thoughts of disbelief, then thoughts of sadness. And yes, it got to us.
It was probably the worst night I've ever gone through in my whole life. To admit that I guess it's just like all of our hope of finding her alive was gone. That we knew that there was no more hope of ever finding her alive again.
The community mourned Sarah's death, but they were also outraged. Who would kill a young girl in such a brutal manner? What they didn't know was that the killer lurked among them. Stay with us. The investigation into Sarah's murder was based on the theory that a random stranger had killed the girl, but no leads were discovered. All the information led nowhere. Suddenly, the police stumbled on what would become the biggest break in the case. One of John Reardon's stepdaughters revealed for the first time that her father may have been molesting Sarah. The focus immediately shifted to John Reardon, and it was the beginning of the end.
Once John became the suspect, the investigation naturally focused on him because everything else that had been developed in the first 2 months or 3 months prior to his becoming a suspect had been run into the ground and hadn't proven fruitful at all.
It actually got around to a point where I just looked at John and I said, John, you've been having sex with your daughter, Sarah. Why don't you tell me about that? That startled him a little, but not a lot. He looked at me and he said, Dick, and he used my name, Dick. He said, I've only had sex with her one time. I said, well, tell me about it. And he told me about it and continued to talk with me. And one thing led to another, and the whole thing kind of unraveled.
The afternoon of the crime, John Reardon followed Sarah home from school. He was cruising in his truck when he saw her walking home, unaware of what lay in store. Reardon demanded to have sex with his daughter. Sarah refused, and the police believe she started to run away to escape from her father's nauseating insistence. Reardon, angered by this rejection, followed her, chased her down, and killed her.
Next thing that I can remember is holding Sarah either by the hair or the throat.
With what hand?
With my left hand.
Okay.
And then hitting her with a sharp awl. I stabbed her in the lower stomach with it.
Were you
just
up
above the belt line. The next thing I can see is her laying on the ground and blood all over.
Where was the blood?
The blood was all over her stomach from the top of her neck all the way down. So there's blood on her arms and on the ground.
Did you hit her with anything besides that awl that you had in your right hand?
Yes, I figured I might have hit her in the throat with my left arm.
How would have you done that?
Like a forearm smash.
Can you show me how you would do it?
Like this.
Like this? Where would have you hit her?
Right in the Adam's apple.
After you hit her that way, how did she fall, or how did she end up on the ground?
She ended up on her back, just spread out, and she was dead then.
To sit there and talk to John Reardon and how he described how he killed his daughter, there was no remorse, none whatsoever, zero. There was no tears, there was no I'm sorries or nothing like that.
I think it was a violent response to what he perceived as a rejection of the only meaningful female relationship, at least, that he had in his life at that moment.
John's life would have been over if Sarah would have come forth and told someone. And I think the anger and the frustration and her running, which she probably hadn't done before, put him over the edge, and in that fury, and stabbed her and killed her.
He killed her to stop her from telling, that's what I believe. He thought that she was going to tell someone, me or someone else, and he killed her to stop her from telling.
The whole community felt raged. We couldn't believe it. This man had stood beside us. We had, during the funeral, we had comforted him and his wife, and we had been right there. We had brought food down to them. We had offered any kind of assistance that they needed. And then it comes out that he killed his daughter.
The community was angry. The community wanted law enforcement to turn John Reardon loose on the streets of Underwood, and they would take care of the problem.
Most people have an idea, a basic idea in their mind, what's right, what's wrong. They were sent out from their homes with morals. Criminals have no morals. They could care less about what's right or what's wrong.
I don't know if you'd call him a human being. Normal human beings do not do what John Reardon has done. Normal people do not have sex with their children, and normal people do not kill their children. John Reardon did all of that.
He showed no discomfort, no embarrassment, no regret, no shame, no grief attached to any of these events that he relayed.
I think initially John didn't think he'd get away with it. I think he thought he'd be caught fairly quickly. I think as time went by and the focus wasn't on him, and it appeared that maybe he had an alibi that was going to stand up, he started to feel that, hey, maybe I can beat this.
Everything that John did was a game. John would try to match wits with everyone, with the investigators, the psychologists, the psychiatrists. It was a game. It was a mind game that he thought he could beat each and every one of us.
John Reardon at trial was the most interesting observation I've ever had of human behavior. His behavior was very unemotional. He seemed to relish in what was happening, seemed to enjoy the attention he was getting. It's hard to explain his demeanor and approach, but I think that demeanor was as significant in securing his conviction ultimately as the evidence we had.
I don't really think of Sarah very often. I really don't. But I just can't change the past, and so I choose not to really think about her very much.
I miss her more than a lot of people even know. I think of her very often. Yes, I miss Sarah a lot.
I was so self-centered. I didn't worry about what might happen. I just took advantage of her and did not worry about the results. But I think in the back of my mind there was always, I knew that there would be a day of reckoning, that I would have to answer someday.
John Reardon is currently serving a life sentence in Minnesota State Prison. He has since married a woman preacher who visited the prison, and he will be eligible for parole in the year 2010. Marilyn Nagel, Sarah's stepmother, was convicted of knowing and allowing physical abuse of a minor and was sentenced to 8 years probation. What is truly sad about this awful crime is that if someone on the outside had known, it might never have happened. If Sarah had told just one person, a school friend, a teacher, or even her own mother. If Sarah's family and friends had been more alert to clues and signs of what was going on inside the Reardon home, Sarah might be alive today. I'm Teresa Saldana. Join me again next time for another unique look inside the criminal mind on Confessions of Crime.